Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I want to thank you all for joining us today for this LinkedIn Live event. This is an Ask Me Anything session where we'll talk about career opportunities in regulatory and medical writing at Certara. For those who don't know, Certara is a global leader in regulatory strategic support, along with regulatory and medical writing support. My name is Heather Graham. I'm joining you today from Toronto, Canada. I am the Vice President of Regulatory Writing and Scientific Publications at Certara, and I have with me today some of my colleagues who are going to join us and tell us a little bit about their roles at Certara and introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their roles at Certara. And so let's start with some introductions. As I said, I have some colleagues with me here today. And so, guys, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and let us know what your role is at Certara. And Jackie, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Heather. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Jackie Binns. I am an Associate Principal Regulatory Writer here at Certara. I work predominantly in the clinical space and have a history in clinical medicine as well as pharmaceutical drug discovery prior to joining Certara. I work with a number of clients from our Tier 1 all the way through to our smaller Tier 1 biotech companies, supporting submissions, regulatory responses, and also support the pediatric practice initiative with colleagues across Certara. Now I'd like to toss it over to Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Meets. I am an Associate Director of Medical Regulatory Writing. I'm a cell and developmental biologist by trade, and I have been a medical writer for over 20 years. I have backgrounds in all sorts of medical regulatory documents, including clinical protocols, CSRs, NDAs, INDs, etc. I've been the principal regulatory writer for submissions on numerous NDAs across many compounds and therapeutic areas. And I'd like to toss over to Diane.
Hi, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Diane Cleverly. I have a PhD, and then after getting my PhD, I decided to enter into writing. I've been writing for more than 20 years. I've written lots of different types of writing, and I decided to try regulatory writing. I'm a senior regulatory writer at Certara, and I also do something called process driving, which is really fun, and it helps to drive the actual regulatory documents through the process of getting submitted. I'm going to toss it over to Mike.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Tavis, and I am the Director of Medical Publications and Communications at Certara. I have been in the pharmaceutical industry for 35 years, and I started out actually as a biochemist, a bench scientist, for 16 years, and I moved into medical communications. I've been a regulatory writer and a publications writer, and then moved on to actually doing oversight for CROs that were supporting publications, and I have been with Certara as the director in this space for about 2 years.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
So Mike Akins is one of our residents, what we call our residents here at Certara. And this is a program, our residency program is a program that we initiated about 2 years ago to bring new writers into the organization and bring them up to speed and train them on regulatory as well as medical writing. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. I'm going to jump into our first official question of the day. And we're going to start right at the very beginning, and we're going to talk about what regulatory writers and medical writers do here. And so, Linda, please, can you describe what a medical publications writer does at Certara?
Sure, absolutely. So I think what I'll start out with is just explaining a little bit about the term medical writing, because it's a pretty broad term, and it's really used to describe all kinds of writing related to health-related research. And so medical publication it is a profession within medical writing, and it is what medical publication writers do is they have the expertise in accepted industry standards, and their role is really to ensure ethical and transparent disclosure to the public, because publication writers disseminate research results and findings to in the public domain. And so that's where they really play a critical role in ensuring ethical and accurate, transparent data disclosure. And so essentially that's the difference between medical publications and I think maybe other areas of medical writing.
Great, thank you. And so, Diane, do you want to walk us through what it is to be a regulatory writer at Certara?
Sure. Being a regulatory writer at Certara is one of the differences, I guess, between publication writing and regulatory writing is that you have to follow the process. You remember any regulatory writing that you do is likely to be audited by the FDA or any other regulatory agency outside or inside, of the U.S. You have to follow all the process. You have to make sure that everything is audited and annotated and make sure that all of your sources are in line. You have to work with your companies very closely. And that, to me, is what makes it very interesting and very fun, is just making sure that everything is in line. And the other thing is you get to work on a variety of documents, so many different types of documents, so many different things. All of the information needs to be cohesive, but you also get to experience so many different types of documents. We do CSRs, we do IDs, we do protocols, we do submissions, all of the different modules for submissions, and so many other things. For a while, I was even doing what you call the standard response letters, the SRLs, which is a meta info type thing. So you never know what's going to come your way when you're at Certara. It's very exciting. Dave, would you have anything to add to that?
Yes, you're exactly right. You never know what's coming your way, or what compound, what functional area you'll be dealing with, what agency around the world. It could be Europe, it could be the US, could be Canada. So you get to see lots of different regulations. And so the process that Diane was talking about are the regulations for each individual area. So the US is the FDA or the EMA in Europe. And so we have to know as a regulatory writer the differences in what types of submission standards and writing standards and scientific standards that we have to utilize for those areas to get those medications and those diagnostics approved in those areas.
Great, thank you. I'm going to do a check-in with Mike again. How are you doing?
Okay. Are you able to hear me now?
We're good.
All right,
yeah.
okay.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I think you did a good job. So my name is Mike Akins. I came in with this regulatory writing residency program. Been with Certara about a year, and I am a regulatory writer working primarily in the non-clinical space. So these are the cell culture and animal model experiments that the companies are using to justify and understand the first in human trials and the endpoints they should be looking at, the potential side effects that may be of a concern. And so these are important. You have to follow the regulations, but also make sure that the information is out there to guide the decision making, both by the companies and the regulatory agencies.
Perfect, thank you. And you actually touched on something that I failed to mention earlier, which is that we do have different areas of regulatory writing, different areas of expertise at Certara. So we have groups that are more specialized and focused on the non-clinical or CMC space. We have groups that are focused on clinical safety and efficacy data, as well as a dedicated pharmacovigilance group. And so there's different skill sets that come to play here, right? And going back to our question about the difference between medical writing and regulatory writing here, for me, I often think about the audience that we're writing for. And, when we write for a health authority submission, it's quite different. It can be quite different than writing for a publication, which is why we consider it distinct skill sets here. So thanks, everyone. Let's keep going. Actually, I wanted to pause right now just to see if we have any early questions from the audience coming through on the chat. So I'm going to read the question out, and actually I should say that we're going to try to get to all of the questions during this live event, but in the event we're unable to, we are happy to loop back to people after the fact. And of course, you now know where to find us on LinkedIn if you have questions after the event. And so the question is, I'm a biochemistry PhD candidate aspiring to become a regulatory writer. How do I position myself for the career as I have no experience in the field? This is such a great question. I can't tell you the number of regulatory and medical writers I've met in my career who have just fallen into this as a career path, because it's a little bit unorthodox to go through school and think that you're going to be a regulatory writer or a medical writer. But what we find is that there's a lot of people out there that really enjoy scientific writing. And so this is the case with myself as well. I really enjoyed writing. I really enjoyed scientific interpretation of data, but I didn't want to be a bench scientist anymore. And so when I finished grad school, I knew I wanted to be done with the bench. And so I'm going to open this question up to the team to see if you have ideas, thoughts, and advice that you can share with this person. So again, just to read the end of it as a reminder, how do I position myself for a career as I have no direct experience in the field? And so maybe somebody can answer that question, but then this is maybe a good opportunity for Mike to also talk about our residency program. So who wants to take this one?
I can start on this one, Heather. So that's actually a good time to start on this. You're coming out with your PhD, which we know you're going to have good research behind you on that. So that's the first thing, understanding the process of how these studies are run. But for a regulatory side, there's a little bit different. So you know the science already, right? That's a good thing. Now you need to know how the regulations are handled. And so our residency writer program is one of those things where you can get in on the ground floor and learn those. But there are also on the different regulatory agencies, there are trainings that you can find. So it's trainings for the regulations and understanding the process of what regulations happen and how studies go from phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. But getting in on either the device side or the pharmaceutical side for this is key. So I would choose one to start. So, I mean, obviously the pharmaceutical side is the larger side, but device is growing as well, and we do both. So learning the process of drug development is very large, and being able to speak to that. Obviously, you're not going to understand all the ins and outs of things to start off with, but just knowing the process of phase 1, 2, 3, and moving forward is the basis of all of the other pieces.
Perfect.
Diane,
Thank you.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I really wish that Demetrius is here, right? So this was something that we spoke about at GIA, was the idea of transferable skills. So I would focus on your transferable skills. You're not just starting out. You don't have anything to offer. You have tons to offer. Yes. Think about what you did in graduate school. You wrote papers. You presented your research. You did the research. So you do have transferable skills. So focus on those transferable skills and repackage them and think about how to present them in a way that would present you more as the writer, right? And less as the scientist. So, what did you do in the way of writing? And get out there, write blogs, attend meetings as best you can. I know it can cost money, but, can you attend them virtually? Is there a way to go? And write about them, blog about them, do presentations for your own stuff and put them out there on the internet. There are ways to show your craft and show that you're good at it, and then put that up there as your sample writing.
Thank you, Diane. I think that's really great feedback as well. My first job hired into the industry, I specifically remember the hiring manager telling me, because I had no regulatory experience and no medical writing experience, and I specifically remember the hiring manager telling me that they needed somebody who understood the science and somebody who could write. The rest of the skills can be learned along the way. And so keep in mind that these are the most fundamental skill set here is the ability to interpret scientific data, the ability to write clear messages in a written form. And then there are some soft skills that often come into play as well. It's interpersonal skills and your ability to work in a team and things like that. I love people who are curious. When people demonstrate curiosity, I think that's a really important attribute as well. So there is one more question that is sort of related to this that I'm going to jump to, which is, what are the minimum requirements to be candidates for having a job as a medical writer or a regulatory writer, and is there a difference? And so I'm going to take a stab at that, but I also want Linda to chime in because she oversees our medical publications space and can speak a bit more specifically to that. In terms of minimum requirements, we are looking for people with a strong scientific background. And so at a minimum, certainly we're looking for people that have a bachelor's degree in some sort of scientific field. And that's because it's really important that we're able to handle and understand scientific data, as well as work with some of the terminology that you might experience in school, whether it's chemistry or molecular biology, concepts like ligation and things like that. And of course, there's a space also for people with more advanced degrees, whether it be masters or PhDs. And so that would be the minimum requirement that we're looking for both the regulatory and the medical writing space. But Linda, I want to give you a chance to chime in specifically in medical publications.
Sure. Thanks, Heather. So I think what's unique about medical publications is that I know there's been a lot of discussion about different phases of development and the different areas of regulatory writing, whether it be CMC or clinical or non-clinical. What's different about MedPubs is that we do it all. So if you're interested in health outcomes, health economics, if you're interested in development of new assays to look at different aspects of a drug, or if you're interested in clinical research, there are opportunities for publications in all phases of drug development throughout the life cycle of a drug. And I think that's what's unique, is that you can really kind of, find your niche of what you're interested in. I think the other difference is that for MedPubs, instead of, as in grad school, as Diane was talking about, those transferable skills absolutely are wonderful to have. The main difference, I think, is that instead of writing up your own research, you're now writing up someone else's research. And so that can be very challenging, and it can also be very interesting because you're working across many therapeutic areas, many phases of drug development. And so, and you're also in a role where, again, you're responsible for ethical and transparent public dissemination of health research. And so you're providing guidance on authorship criteria, you're providing guidance on, choosing your target venues, what congresses you'd like to present at, what are the appropriate journals. So all of those skills and knowledge. And so I would recommend, if you don't have experience in those areas, there are a lot of professional organizations that offer a lot of great information, AMWA, ISMPP, a lot of medical writing organizations.
Thanks, Linda. That's a great segue to our next question, actually. But before I get there, I want to just maybe share a story with the audience, which is going back to what Linda was saying about how interesting the work can be. I've heard stories about Linda and her team discussing different publications that they were asked to write, and just people having the opportunity to say, hey, that sounds like really exciting, cutting edge research, and I really want to work on that in particular. And so I think it gives a good it gives some insight into the opportunities that we see day to day here, but also that people have the chance to stay at the forefront of the industry, whether it's in the research space or in submissions, to see what is happening out there. And I think that that's really exciting. So the next question we got from the audience that I mentioned was a good segue is, do you recommend AMWA certification? And so for those who perhaps don't know, AMWA is the American Medical Writers Association. There is a counterpart in Europe, which is appropriately named EMWA. And so I get this question a lot. About whether we officially recommend somebody have a specific certification. And my answer is typically that it can't hurt, but it is by no means a requirement. And so going back to the question we had a few minutes ago, where somebody had inquired about how do you break into this field if you don't have any direct experience writing a submission or a publication, perhaps, the American Medical Writers Association is a really good resource for people to go and explore terminology, the type of language that we use, what the different documents are that make up a submission, important skill sets that a medical writer might have. And so by no means is AMWA certification required to have a position at Certara or even to apply. It can be helpful for some people to pursue that. And so, so I don't think there's any more audience questions for the time being. So we're going to go back to some of the questions that we brought here today. And this is one that I'm actually really excited to ask because I don't know what the answers are going to be. But what advice would you give yourselves early in your career, either shortly before joining Certara or perhaps when you just joined? And so who wants to kick that one off? What advice would you have given yourself?
I'll take it. Oh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave. No,
Okay.
you go.
I would say for a medical regulatory writing, I say medical regulatory writing because I feel that a medical regulatory writer can do both the publication side and the regulatory side equally as well. Obviously, we typically have a side we prefer. But I think as you develop in your career, you should learn both sides of the business because one supports the other. They roll into each other. You don't have a submission without publications. You don't have publications, well, not all the time, but without some sort of drug submission going through. So that's one thing. Learn both sides of the business because that will help you. And then the second piece I would say would be more along if you're leaning towards the regulatory side to really learn the regulations and why they're there. Not just I need this 2.5 or this 274, and those are numbers that you may or may not know. But why do I need these documents? Where do the pieces flow through your submission of this drug or this device? How they interact? And where are the ins and outs? And that takes a little bit of time. And, at the beginning of my career, I was focused on let's get this document done and this document done and this document done. And I wasn't focused on how do these tie together as a whole piece. And as I learned, I started to have realizations of, oh, wow, this fits into that. And these pieces are fitting together really well. And it made more of a story for me. And that's when things started to move up for me. And Linda.
Thanks, Dave. So, my comments were a little bit different. I really wanted to say that, my advice to you would be to don't be afraid to try something new. And so if you have a wonderful manager, supervisor who, takes an interest and sees some unique skills and strengths that you have and provide some opportunities or you're tapped on the shoulder to try something new, try it. Don't be afraid. We all fail at different things and you might find that, once you get past your comfort zone and other people have seen a strength in you. And the reason I say that is because during my lab days, a number of people had commented that they felt that I was a really good writer. And so, that kind of prompted me after 16 years to move into, to try medical writing. And so don't wait 16 years. If there's something that you have been identified that you feel that, you'd like to try and people have told you you're good at it, don't be afraid. That's my advice.
Thanks.
Sure. So I'll
Who wants to go next? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to ask the same thing.
So Jackie and I both raised our hands. I don't know.
Go ahead, Mike. That's
All
fine.
right. So my advice actually is very similar. So I've only been in this career for a year. So I'm looking back to earlier when, I was in academia doing research there in a sort of small niche within a clinically relevant field, but not something necessarily where I felt I was making a strong impact on human health. And my advice is, be courageous and do this sooner, right? I've really enjoyed this job, the challenges, the colleagues. This is a really good fit for my skill set. And I wish I had sort of come to that realization, like you said, 10, 15 years ago. And in part, I wish I'd learned more about regulatory writing at that point. It's anyone who's listening today has already taken that step and gotten ahead of where I was on the curve. But go and find, look out there at the options and see what the things are in the world where you can feel like you're making a difference, but in a way that capitalizes on your skill set. And for me, communication is one of those ways that, taking ideas and simplifying them and presenting them in a way that's digestible is something that I've always been good at. And this gives me an opportunity to do that, focus on that part of the overall sort of drug from discovery to treatment. This is a part that I feel like I can contribute and, find that sooner.
Yeah.
So Jackie, if you want to.
Sure. Just to echo both what Linda and Mike said, don't be afraid to take a risk. Having come from clinical medicine and big pharma prior to joining Certara, I feel like this has given me the opportunity to bring everything full circle and, explore new passions and have exposure to different opportunities, working on different therapeutic areas. I have passion in pediatrics as well as neuroscience, but learned a lot about a number of other therapeutic areas and had the opportunity to work with a number of cross-functional teams. So like they both said, I wish I would have done this sooner, but everything falls into place at the right time. So happy to have fallen into this position. So, and have an impact on a number of, therapeutic areas as well as patients in the long term. So definitely grateful for this opportunity.
I have something really different in the way of advice, actually. Something that I've seen, and I honestly haven't seen it here at Certara because I think we have a really good company culture in the way that we handle feedback to our junior writers. But I've been in other situations where that hasn't been so much the case. Is when newer writers come in, and this was something that happened that I saw, as a newer writer, is whenever anyone gives you feedback, take that very much so to heart as people are trying to help you learn. And I've seen younger, newer writers take that too much as, to their person, as something personally, oh, you made a mistake or you've done something wrong, and they get discouraged. And then they don't last very long, in the writing field because it's a very deeply personal thing to write.
Yeah.
And you're putting your thoughts and your feeling, you're putting it on the page. And then someone comes and they cross everything out with the red pen, and then it feels like they're crossing you out and you're taking it personally. And just don't do that as a writer. Try to take that as, oh, they're just helping you learn and they're caring for you. And it's an act of caring. Feedback is an act of caring. Someone cares enough to help you learn. And so that's my advice to people when they're starting out, is that to take that to heart. Like I had a really good mentor who, although she was very, very critical of my writing, everything she gave me was an act of caring to help me learn and get better. So.
And that's exactly right. Not to take these things to heart. That those soft skills are very important because we not only do we manage our own work, but we're managing how those reviewers, whether it's inside a pharmaceutical company or at the agency, the FDA, EMEA, are reviewing, and the feedback that you get from them on what was written. And to deal with those comments as individual comments and not a reflection on you as a person or you as a writer, your scientific ability, and how you handle that soft skills and how you manage your projects. Those are you're part project manager in this. You're not just putting your fingers on the keyboard and typing something down. And you're not an island. You're not sitting in your basement somewhere. You might be sitting in your basement, but you're not sitting somewhere in the dark and writing this and just sending it out to the world. You have a whole team that you're working with to develop this content.
These are such great points. I was reflecting while you guys were speaking, because it really gives an opportunity to take a moment to appreciate the value that we bring to the overall healthcare ecosystem. I want to acknowledge that I am obviously incredibly biased in this space, but our medical writers and our regulatory writers really have the opportunity to bring healthcare solutions to patients through the work that we do, to ensure that there's transparency around new therapeutics in the market. And for me personally, that's something I really value, is really focusing on the patients at the end of the day, and the work we get to do there. So we do have some more questions coming in from the audience, which I'm going to get to in one moment, because before I get to those questions, I'm going to ask Mike to speak a little bit about our residency program. And so there are some questions around the residency program, but before we address those specifically, what we refer to as our residency program is actually our regulatory writer acceleration residency. And so Mike is actually somebody who joined us in the first class of our residents. And so do you want to tell us a little, or tell the audience a little bit more about our residency program, please?
Yeah, so this is a program. So I was in the first group of 5 or 6 of us who joined last June. And it gives you an opportunity. In some ways, a lot of the concerns that you have when you're coming new to the field are built into the expectations, right? We're going to learn, one by one, the documents or the parts of the document. And I can speak more to my experience as a non-clinical writer, learning the different aspects of, the pharmacology, which is how the drug works, the pharmacokinetics, which is what the body does to it, and the toxicology, which is kind of, the sort of the safety concerns. And these are all echoed in the clinical side as well. But you have a different message that you're trying to convey. And so it gave me an opportunity to learn those document types, each, working in a different team with a different client on a different indication area, and kind of ramp up my understanding of this overall process. There's some formal training that goes along with it. And then there's also again, getting up to speed with some of the processes and the expectations from the agency side. And then on the job learning, right? And that's with a mentor that's helping you. I've been fortunate enough to have essentially a team of mentor. Everyone in the non-clinical space has been very supportive. But I have, an official mentor that's making sure that I'm progressing. She's answering, because you have a lot of when you first start out, you have a lot of what seem like minuscule questions that are actually total roadblocks, right? And so having that, those roadblocks cleared out of the way with the help of the mentor really helps get to the point where you're actually contributing to the project. So it's overall a 2-year program, and it's naturally designed to go more from that, more of a classroom style in the beginning to, I think the idea is that by the end of the 2 years, you're more or less roaming free, just with a little more oversight than someone who comes in at a more advanced level. So I think that's the broad overview.
Sure. Yeah. So, some people in the chat, the questions have touched on this a little bit. The fact that if you want to be a regulatory writer or a medical writer, you can't just go to school for something like that. You can't just go and get a bachelor's degree in this field. And so the residency program is largely in recognition of that. It's our commitment to the industry to build the next generation of regulatory and medical writers, if you will. And so there's a lot of questions that are coming through about this program. So maybe I'll just speak to a few of them and hope that I hit some of the big ones. People are asking, how do I get involved? How do I learn more? And so what I would recommend is that you follow Certara on LinkedIn. I can tell you that we are currently intending to begin recruitment and hiring of our next group of residents, if you will, our next class, in around Q4 2022, so later this year, looking to bring them into the organization to start in early 2023. And so the best way to keep on top of all of the opportunities coming out of Certara is really to follow us on LinkedIn, to check back with our website. And of course, you know how to find us on LinkedIn as well. And so we could be useful points of contact along the way. The other question that has come in that is not specific to the residency program is really around the ability and the opportunity to work remotely. And so I do want to say yes. This is I joined Certara in December of 2021. I am 100% remote, and it's one of the things that I really appreciate about working here. And so we have a presence in the US, so you can generally work anywhere in the United States and Canada, and in most of Europe, primarily in Western Europe, as well as some other countries in the world. And so the point is that we do have offices. And so for some people, they really enjoy the experience of going into an office, meeting people face to face. We absolutely have offices around Canada and the US and Europe. And we offer the option for people to be 100% remote, which I think in this day and age, especially as we have come through the pandemic, I was home for a really long time. And as a parent, I certainly appreciate that flexibility and that option. So yes, remote working is a go. I'm just scrolling up in the chat to see some of the other questions and make sure that we're getting to them. So there's a question about should a regulatory writer be acquainted with all of the regulatory guidelines of all of the nations following EMA, EMEA, FDA, TGA? And so I think this is a really good question. I would say it's a yes and. So certainly it's helpful if you have experience working with health authorities around the world. It's helpful to have that experience because then you understand perhaps the specific components that need to go into a submission in a given region. You may even know the nuances of a specific health authority. And all of these things can come in handy. But like I said, we have opportunities here where we understand and we expect that people may be coming in with limited to no knowledge of these specific regulations. And so it's a nice to have. It's absolutely not required. The other thing I wanted to call out is because many of the countries that are listed in this question, so Europe, the MHRA, which is the UK, FDA, Health Canada, Japan, TGA in Australia, many of these countries follow the Common Technical Document, which was a standard of submission that was established by the ICH, or International Conference on Harmonization, a number of years ago. And so although there's nuances around the world, oftentimes if you know one, it's very transferable to a different health authority. So I hope that helps answer that question. Next question. What are the differences, similarities between medical writing, regulatory affairs, and clinical research? This is such a great question. And so for me, I'm going to open it up to the group, but I'm going to take a stab at this first. For me, it comes down to the underlying skill set and abilities of or expertise of a given individual. Medical writing or regulatory writing, this is really a area that focuses on writing. So the core capability there is writing. Your audience may differ between a publication, a journal, or perhaps a health authority, but the core capability there is writing. Regulatory affairs, generally speaking, and this can often also come down to how a company is set up. In general conversation, when you're talking about regulatory affairs, it most often refers to a function at a company that is the primary conduit or go-between between the company and a health authority. So these are the individuals that are perhaps planning a submission, strategizing on what goes into a submission. These are the individuals that are putting their names on the cover letter, fielding questions from a health authority. But I want to really emphasize the fact that for me, there is a large amount of overlap in these skill sets because oftentimes in smaller organizations, what we find is that a regulatory affairs department is going to be responsible for some writing. And certainly when I started my career at a small biotech company, I was a regulatory affairs associate. I wasn't a medical writer, but I would say that 80% of my job there was to write. I wrote protocols and IBs and all the rest of it. And so oftentimes it does come down to the organization and whether they have a distinct medical writing or regulatory writing group versus a regulatory affairs department. And I want to emphasize that there is a lot of overlap there. And just because what I want to emphasize is that a regulatory writer or a medical writer, there's a tremendous amount of regulatory strategy that goes into preparing a document or a submission. And so it's not quite as easy as separating one from the other. And then clinical research, in my mind, can be a number of different things. So in my mind, for a pharmaceutical company or a CRO, I consider clinical research or clinical operations as the group, the function that actually runs clinical trials. So they are actually testing and measuring the safety and efficacy of a compound or a molecule in a patient population that has been defined. And so for me, that's the distinction between those three things. I also want to call out that there is a lot of overlap in the skill sets that are involved here. So if you want to be a good regulatory writer or a medical writer, it's important that you're also able to understand what goes into a clinical study protocol, how clinical study how trials are actually run, and some of the considerations. So again, there's quite a bit of overlap in those three areas, but in my mind, that's the distinction. And I'm going to pause there just to see if the team has anything else to add to that.
So Heather, I can thank you. Just another clarification to your point.
Sure.
I think that the knowledge base is very different between medical writing and regulatory writing. And so all of the things that you talked about, ICH guidelines and health authority requirements, are very important things to be at least aware of in the regulatory writing space, because your audience, as Heather mentioned, your audience is they are regulatory authorities. That's who you're writing for. In the publication space, there's a whole different set of industry standards that you really need to be aware of. And I think that is also a distinguishing factor. The writing is important, but I think a medical publication professional, for example, needs to be able to provide guidance on author selection, target journal selection, understanding the audience that they're writing for. So, as far as good publication practices, ICMJE guidelines, and there are many other guidelines that are accepted by journal editors in the field of medical publication. So it's just a little bit of a different knowledge base, but definitely there is definitely a lot of overlap. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Linda, for keeping me honest as well in our responses here. I'm going to go back to the questions again. So there's a question here. I'm going to read it out. Would pursuing a PhD study in clinical pharmacology help me to become a competitive medical writer? Or do you recommend to build more medical writing career experiences than pursuing a PhD? I think this is a really great question, especially because I've had lots of interactions with people that are sort of at this stage in their academic career, that perhaps they're finishing up some undergrad work and they want to consider what's next for them. And so before I answer the question, I do want to say that I think that this is a highly personal choice that everybody needs to make for themselves. And it's really important to remember that. And I want to say that some of the best medical writers or regulatory writers I have ever worked with did not have a PhD. And so I don't believe it always will make one candidate, if you will, more or less successful than the next candidate. And I want to emphasize what I said a minute ago, which is that I think that this is a really personal decision that people need to make for themselves. But like I said, I've had many writers that I've worked with that did not have a PhD.
I want to follow on with that,
Sure.
Heather.
Sure.
So it is a highly personal choice. And I will say, get the level of education that you want to get now. It's harder to go back once you start working. It's not impossible, but it's harder once you start getting a paycheck. So I will say, get the education that you would like to get. The medical writing field will be there, and it is growing daily. So do that. Is it a requirement? No. Will pharmacology help you in the pharmacology space? Absolutely, it will. However, there are quite a few places within the Common Technical Document, talking regulatory terms, where we're not talking about pharmacology. But it will help you in learning how trials are built, the PK and the population analysis and all of those different things that we do that I learned as I went. And I'm one of those that does not have a PhD. So it can be done without a PhD. And I have learned over time through just the curiosity of science that I've had. And I got way back when, I'm not going to say what year, it's a long time ago, was lured out of academia by a paycheck. And I got a pharmaceutical job and worked in device research. And then I fell into writing. I was told, hey, you're really good at, doing these protocols and these reports. Can you write these for us? And I was like, great, I can get out of the lab. Awesome. And then it led into a full-fledged medical writing job, and then, moved into different companies from there. So it's how you want to go. But I will say, get your education at the level you want to get, because that is most important for who you are.
Thank you.
If I could add something to that. I may want to suggest reframing the question a little bit, because I know when you're looking for a job, you're really worried about being a candidate.
Yeah.
But I would encourage the person who asked that and anybody listening to think about what steps you can take to make yourself a better writer, right? And think about that. Is there a tool set, that you can learn in the PhD process that is necessary in your development, right? The diving in deep on thinking about a particular project that you need and you can't get elsewhere. To really help you grow as a writer. And I think about what can help you grow as a writer more than what's going to get your foot in the door, because you're really going to, that gets you to day one of the job, but you got to keep, you hope to have a long career there. And PhD is one way to get those skills. There's other ways to get those skills. I think regardless of where you go, find a good mentor.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to take one more of the audience questions for now. And so the question that has come up, I love these live television events, right? With things that we hear in the background. What is the most challenging part of your day as a regulatory or medical writer? And so Diane's excited about this one. Who wants to take that one and share some of our more challenging things that we encounter?
I would say it depends on the day. And honestly, that's the fun of the job, right? I mean, really, so I just want to dispel the myth. Every day is not us waking up, sitting down at our computer and writing for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, whatever of a day. The thing is, the job it can be so many different things. So we're not just writing, we're emailing, we're on Zoom calls, we're in meetings, we're interacting with key opinion leaders, like really, really smart, research leaders who are doing cutting edge research, and they're so smart, they're brilliant, and we get to talk to them and we get to interact with them and we get to partner with them. And then sometimes there's like these really challenging problems with these documents and these timelines, and you have to solve these problems. And people are looking at you and they're looking at your expertise, and you're the one who has to do it. And it feels so good. It feels so good to actually do that. And And there's so many things like every day. So there's not just one challenge. Like there are many challenges. And that is honestly the fun of it. Like it's not just sitting and writing. The writing is great. You're not just doing that. You're a project manager. You're, helping your colleagues do things. You're pitching in. You have an extra hour when you're waiting for something to come back. You're jumping in and you're being the hero and helping your colleague. You're working with these really other people and different clients that are so interesting, and it's so challenging. Everything's challenging, and it's really a lot of fun. That's what I have to add to that.
I would say it's only a smaller percentage of actually writing. I see the medical writer as the hub of this pharmaceutical development. So when you get into the late stage, so they're the project. I mean, you might have a project manager, but you're also doing project management. And with the smaller clients, so some startups, you're also their educator. So you, as an experienced medical writer, are teaching some of these people the first submission, their first CSR, their first investigator's brochure, how the process works. These are the standards that we do. So you're also an educator. We have also the opportunity to get involved with conferences. I know Diane and I are involved with DIA. We go to conferences and help train the next level of medical writers. So AMWA as well. We have a high impact on AMWA. We have a lot of writers that go and train there and present there. So we do those as well. So those are two places where you can learn the basics of medical writing and get in touch with the industry. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to start to get into that, to look for the organizations that can help you to move forward.
Thank you. So we're going to do one more question because we are coming up towards the top of the hour. And so our last question for today is, what is it that you like or love about working at Certara? And Jackie, I'm going to ask, do you want to go first? We haven't heard from you in a while.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Heather. No, one of the greatest things about working at Certara is having the ability to contribute to a number of different opportunities, a number of different projects, having the opportunity to grow and develop both professionally and personally, as well as mentoring others and pursuing your passions. I also have the opportunity to work both remotely as well as come into some of the offices as well when time allows, and maintaining a work-life balance, as I do have two small children at home as well. So, just a couple of the reasons why I really enjoy working at Certara.
Thank you.
Sure.
Who'd like to go next?
So I can go next, Heather. So I would, from my perspective in my role, I really love working with such great people. I have an amazing team of writers who are passionate about medical publications, and they're the most collaborative group. There's a lot of shared learning that goes on. They help each other, and it's the day-to-day, that's so important, that you enjoy what you do on a day-to-day basis. And I really do enjoy that.
Amazing. Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in and share?
I'll try. I have one of the I'll explain. One of the benefits is being able to work remotely, is being able to balance. I have a dog that is normally at my feet the entire day, and she is very trying to understand why I'm so mad at her and keeping her out of the room. So I apologize if she's noisy in the background. So it's really, I just wanted to double down on what everyone else has said. It's been a great set of colleagues. They've been really supportive, right? I came with a general understanding of how you do and think about experiments, but not any practical regulatory experience. And they've just been so helpful in helping me develop, but also helping me learn about particular projects. The variety of projects I've worked on is tremendous. I'm a cellular neuroscientist by training. I've worked on cardiovascular indications, oncology indications. right? And all of these are just sort of scratch that itch that I always have of just wanting to learn more, right? And that, we get that in spades here.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment and share?
I feel that the variety, what Michael was saying, is what I like. I am able to work with multiple people from multiple organizations at all different levels. Some very, very experienced with the pharmaceutical industry. Some it's their first time out, and being able to be that educator, being involved in professional organizations. The work is great. I learn about things that aren't on the market yet, studies, and that just keeps my knowledge current and keeps my scientific skills on point, because I'm always learning something new every project. I'll go into cardiovascular on one project and oncology on the next project and anti-infectives on the next project, and it just keeps me on my toes, and I love that.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So I'll share mine really quickly. For me, it always comes down to the people. I'm very much a people person. I love regulatory and medical writing. I think it's very fun, and I think it's very cool. And we have such a great group of people here who've been very welcoming. As I said, I'm newer to the organization. And so, we're going to close out for today. I want to thank all of you guys for joining. I'm talking to my speaker colleagues right now to thank you for making time for this and being so honest with your thoughts on what it's like to be a regulatory and medical writer at Certara. And I want to thank the audience. I don't know how many people are out there watching us today, but I want to thank the audience for signing up and for participating, for taking time to listen to what we had to say. Follow us on LinkedIn, and of course, you now know where to find us on LinkedIn. Before we close out officially, we're going to just show you a short 2-minute video that gives you a bit of an idea of what it's like to work at Certara. And so again, thank you for joining, and until next time, I'm Heather Graham, and this has been great. Thank you all.
I love working at Certara because there is nothing more meaningful than to work with really, really bright people to solve the toughest scientific problems that ends up accelerating medicines to the patients who need them most.
One of the best parts of being at Certara is the opportunity to grow and learn from each other and our partners.
I came here because there was a great sense of purpose and mission here. I wanted to be in a growth environment. I wanted to be in a place where we were doing really important things in life sciences.
During the recruitment process, I had the opportunity to interview with a lot of different people at Certara. Every single person I talked to, the passion they had for what they did, for their clients and the people in the company and the mission, it really shined through. It was that passion that sealed the deal for me.
I have had a long career at Certara. One constant that I see throughout my career are the opportunities for people to see their potential and realize it.
Colleague experience is at the forefront of everything we do at Certara. Our people are our most important asset.
The people I get to work with at Certara are the best and the brightest in their fields. They are great teammates, they're fun to collaborate with. I thoroughly enjoy working with them every day.
I often tell my clients that when they engage with Certara, they are not just engaging with me, but are essentially engaging with 1,000 great minds to support their drug development program.
At Certara, we have a smart and intellectually curious team with over 300 PhDs. Collaboration is key, and when our teams come together to help our partners solve their unique challenges, patients win.
What differentiates us is our people and our purpose. We bring our value to our clients through the collective subject matter expertise, market-tested methods, and our overall program management skills. We never, ever let our clients down.
We are doing interesting and important work, and I am inspired every day about what I see around me. I am excited about the road ahead.